Hello, once again teaching video on doctrine, eschatology topics, and today I thought I would not actually begin with another TV test pattern, but I thought I would begin with Cheerful Mickey Mouse as my MC. But now let's get into the material that I've prepared today. Believe we're up to episode 10 here. Now, up till now we've been often concentrating on when do certain events happen, like resurrection, coming, judgment. That's a valid thing to look into, and look into all the time statements on that. But equally, must we not ask, are these things events or processes that began sometime but never end? And when I say never end, maybe you could amend that without my saying throughout this video, and who knows when. Well, God's eternity never ends, as we read in Psalm 90. So it would be absurd to regard God's eternity as an event, because it never ends. Now, that middle term above, the coming, seems to be regarded by all parties as an event. Well, why? Because it's always described that way in Scripture, Acts 1:11, etc. But I'll review this point near the end once again. It'll be important to the whole debate. So now, the resurrection. Isn't the resurrection always described in Scripture as an event? Like John 5:28-29, a passage we'll get back to. It has a beginning, middle, end, then it's over. The plain reader, what else can the plain reader think? 5 prime, suppose somebody with a theory gets back to me and says, it's described as if it was an event, but, really it's a process. Now, this appears to me impossible. Doesn't God describe things as they really are? Isn't there Scripture realism? I think even Russell in his book Parousia understood this, commenting on John 5, this very passage here. I'm going to just read the citation from Russell here. At the end of this outline, there will be a reference where you can find what I'm reading. Russell actually says about this passage, the buried dead would ere long come forth from their graves. Plain sense of the event in John 5:28, it seems to me, as Russell understood. Now we're down here. Making what the Bible defines as an event into an endless process in order to have a chronological scheme not conflict with the event, that's not exegesis, Bible interpretation at all. It's eisegesis, which is just a fancy word for meaning reading your own views into the Bible rather than what's actually in the Bible. In the future of this discussion, I will recur to John 5:28-29. We're really very fortunate that exists in Scripture. It's a solid Scripture definition of the resurrection, one of the chief topics of these videos. Now, about the judgment. isn't it uniformly described as an event, with beginning, middle, end, like in Matthew 25? Then it's over. There's no endless process here, or process that ends who knows when. To say it's described as event, but, quote, really is endless process, there is nothing in the text to allow us to make it anything but an event. Let's be sober in what we're talking about when we say judgment as well as resurrection. To sum up, I claim the following, and from previous videos you may see my common tactic here. No text directly asserts that resurrection and judgment are anything but events with beginning, middle, end. No text, in fact, directly implies that resurrection and judgment are anything but events with beginning, middle, end. And then because of these two, if we take these as proven, the resurrection and judgment cannot be endless processes. That's what I think. I think that's what Scripture requires. If an opponent against all of the above still claims that resurrection and judgment are processes, not events, look what that does to his position on the coming. Review point 4 above. Scroll back to it in the video if you have to on YouTube. By arguing that resurrection and judgment are processes, though always described as events, he's just destroyed, from his point of view, any possible proof of his type of preterism. You see, he wants to say that the coming is an event that is over, beginning, middle, end. But he can give no reason by his method of interpreting Scripture, his method, not mine, you see, why the coming too is not in fact such a thing, a process, though always described as an event. So where's his preterism? His version of preterism. I mean, not all preterists are like this, mind you. For example, those 100+ time statements only indicate, those 100+ time statements that he and friends find in the New Testament only indicate that the coming is a process that began in 70 AD. Well, if it is such a process, ending who knows when, then there's in fact room in the future for resurrection, just as in John 5:28-29. And here's that reference to Russell's well-known book, The Parousia. You see, I give the book title, the date of the edition I'm using, and the page number, page 124. Russell understood this. Pretty plain stuff here. Now I close with some show notes. All right. My show notes here. They're under Mickey. This one does not directly reply to any email I've received from opponent, which means I'm way behind in reviewing these emails. Give me time. I'll get to them. Kind of like the tortoise. Eventually he'll cross the finish line. Before today, this war had two fronts. And I'm not abandoning these two fronts by any means. Future videos will continue to deal with these 2 points on the show notes page. There is no scripture proof of first century resurrection date. And 2, resurrection is defined everywhere in Scripture as in John 5:28-29, which we either agree with, as Russell did, or disagree, not honoring this word of Christ as true. I hear people mentioning about the chronology that believe a certain chronology or you dishonor Christ. Doesn't that equally apply to the plain sense of this John 5 text here? And today I really open up a new line of attack, which I'll call the logic front. Surely we as Christians must understand Scripture as describing reality. And if it describes something as an event, my whole point in this video, if it describes something as an event with beginning, middle, and end composing the thing, well, then it must be an event. Or if you doubt that, isn't that mere skepticism and reading one's own views into Scripture? Of course, God describes events as events in Scripture as they really are. Well, till next time, this has been a longish one.